Hey there, and welcome to episode number 11
Wow.
of Dial a Drummer. I'm Brian Stephens.
I'm Shannon Kori.
And we haven't been here for a few weeks.
We've been some busy bees.
It's been a couple of weeks, but it's felt like a month of Sundays.
Yes.
My entire life has felt like a month of Sundays.
We had a holiday and a hurricane.
Yeah. All good reasons to not do this.
Right.
Anyway, so, and now we have no idea if the live stream's working today, so we're just going to pretend that people are watching us.
Right. Hope for the best.
We know that they'll watch us after the fact. You can catch up. That's why there's archives of this. You can go to dialadrummer.net and you can catch the audio and the video from all our past episodes. We're 2 behind right now, but by the end of this week, I hope those will be caught up.
Okay.
Because by next Monday, I'd like to kind of be back in the groove and be my normal, calm, collected, organized self.
Gotcha. I'm making a note. Monday.
The world ends. The meteor hits and it's all over. So thank you so much for tuning in. Normally, you can call us on the toll-free line 844-833-3786, but this week, not so much so. We are on Spreaker right now. I do know that's happening, so hopefully 1 or 2 people are listening on Spreaker. Usually, every Monday, you can catch us. I like the 4 o'clock time.
Yeah.
How you feel about 4?
I like it.
We may try 7. We may try 8 o'clock just to see what happens, but I don't want you here at all hours of the night. You're a family man.
I am a family man.
You got kids you like.
I do. Love my kids.
You want to be able to stay
Spend
around.
time with them. Absolutely.
Actually be able to talk to them instead of talking at them. And anyway, I don't know where that came from, but a little slice of life there, folks. What have you been doing the past couple of weeks?
Working a lot.
Yeah?
A lot of gigs. Prepping a new band that I'll talk about more later. I'm excited about.
I've seen some of the video pieces and pictures of things.
Coming along nicely.
Looking good.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
How about yourself? You've had a huge project to undertake.
What a lot of people may not realize is about a third of my week is doing something. It's still music related. It's still audio and studio related because that's what I am. I'm a drummer, engineer, producer, sometimes video guy, creative professional is what I like to call it. Normally in the course of any given week, 15 to 20 hours of my week, about a third to 25%. If you're tallying, if you're keeping score, if this were a baseball game and you had one of those little sheets that you wrote
Start
on.
taking stats.
Walks and strikeouts.
F-bombs.
Yeah. If you were keeping score, 15 to 20 hours of my 60 to 80 hour week is as a AV coordinator and front of house mixer for a church.
You're the glue, in other words.
Kind of like what I do with this podcast sometimes.
Because if it weren't for Brian, it wouldn't be happening. I'm just going to say that right now.
We do like some other podcasts. We put a little Zoom recorder right there and we would talk for an hour and then that's what you would get. But I have a little bit higher threshold that I set, higher bar of excellence that I'd like to be known for.
Sure.
I'd like for us to be known, if nothing else, the content in this podcast may be pretty crappy. I'd like to think it isn't.
But the production will be
magnificent. The production is lights out awesome.
That's funny. Brian has a lot of wonderful skill sets, and he's very good at all of them.
But we're here this week.
We are
That's
here.
The
We're back.
Thing. And the past few weeks, we've talked about some really important things, some things that are near and dear to our hearts. And as if we haven't gotten geeky enough between in-ear monitor mixes and
digital boards.
Yeah, practice routines and strategies. And we're going to dive deep today into the world of apps.
Yes.
Computer apps, mobile apps, tablet apps. We're going to talk to you about some of our favorite, most useful apps that we use on gigs and sessions and to practice, and maybe even in the office. You just never know, because we literally did no preparation for this. In fact, we wouldn't have a show topic if you wouldn't have come up with it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The people out there, the one person on the other side of that camera that's watching
the little
listening.
Smiley face that we have drawn on the camera.
That person thanks you for having a good idea when I'm completely devoid of them. So that's what we're talking about today. But before we talk about that, we do have a sponsor.
Nice.
And the sponsor this week is SessionAce.com.
Man, I've heard of that guy.
You have. You've heard of that company.
I have.
In fact, we've been using their very first product. I'm talking in third person. That's not weird at all, is it?
I like it, though.
Is that your phone?
It is. My phone. My watch is going
we
off.
We are geeky, aren't we?
I know.
You and your Dick Tracy watch. I don't even have one of those.
This may be the only gadget you actually don't own.
I know.
I mean, Brian's got 18 iPods and 32 iPads and 72 Samsung. And that's just in this room.
Yeah, that's just in this room.
I mean, 1, 2... There's 4 TVs in this room, people.
And none of them have sports. Not a single one of them.
That's why you're a genius.
That's why I have no life, probably. But that's good. I enjoy it. It's fun.
It keeps you hired, sir.
Yeah. So SessionAce.com it's actually a site I started a few weeks ago. I think we talked about it a few episodes ago. Mm-hmm. And the very first product that we've put out is something that you and I have been using for the past few months. A set of in-ears called
They come in this fancy little case.
The EST, the Session Ace EST. That stands for Everything Sounds Terrific. And I'll let the cat out of the bag because we can't do close-ups right now. I'm actually using a prototype.
Oh,
that's
something
even
new
better
over there.
Than release number 1.
Okay.
So we've been using release number 1, and it's an amazing.
Yeah, they sound
monitor.
fantastic.
And I've actually been playing around with doing some improvements over the base model because as I've actually been using this for almost a year now at this point, and I was looking for something that was even better than what we had before.
Gotcha.
So we've upgraded the armature in this. We've upgraded the dynamic driver in it. And we've made some customized things about this. And it'll actually have the Session Ace
Looks like a newer
branding.
cable as well.
Yep, newer cable, super cool connection. I'm going to unplug that so I don't hear anything in this ear. It's a standard, I think I call it an MMCX connector. Mm-hmm. All of your pro level in-ears have this connector.
It's kind of like a quick
these
connect.
Kind of cables.
Yep.
And so if for some reason you order a set of these ESTs and you have a cable that you like better, now you can use your own cable. It comes with 2 or 3 great cables, but now if you have a cable from your old set of ear monitors that has an MMCX connector, you can actually just use that cable.
Oh, nice.
And replace it with these amazing sounding ears that if you log on to SessionAce.com right now and buy a set, they're only $99. And the thing I've had to explain to people is it's not just the ears.
Right.
It's that really nice water-resistant plastic case that closes. There's 2 different sets of cables. If you are in the first round of beta people that have ordered through the site, you actually get a surprise cable that not a whole lot of people know about yet. You get to try something first. Lots of different ear tips, a 10-foot nylon mesh extension cable, an adapter. There's a lot of stuff in that
nice little package.
box. If you wait too long, though, especially by the time this revision comes out in about another 8 weeks,
they're going to be gone.
And they're going to actually be a little more expensive.
Yeah.
That was the one thing in making these upgrades and making everything truly custom that I also found out that there's a little bit higher price tag on truly custom. So we've tried to keep the margins low.
Nice.
I literally work with the people in China directly. We email now because phone calls are completely
You're on
ridiculous.
a totally different clock.
Plus, I have to stay up to like 3 a.m. for that. And the language barrier can be a problem even with people that speak English fairly well. So email's a lot better. But so I deal directly with them. They send me what I have developed. So they literally come from the factory to my house to the person that orders them.
Right.
I've just cut out all 6 middlemen that it takes to normally get a set of in-ears into a store.
Direct sales, baby. No stores.
So I can keep the margins really, really low, and that way I can pass on a ton of value to you in these in-ear monitors.
They really are great sounding. I've been one of your beta testers for the last year, and it's worth $100 by far.
It's a ton of value.
It's a $400 package you're getting for $100.
And it sounds better than certain brand name $500 in-ears.
Agreed.
So by all means, please go over to sessionace.com, order yourself a set, and help support the people that put on these little puppet shows for you every single week.
That's right.
Well, except for the last 2 weeks.
Got to keep a brother working.
That's right. I got to replace some income. I'm going to cut that one out. So today we're talking about apps.
Yes.
And app culture has sort of taken the world by storm.
It's quite frightening, actually.
Pretty much, if you don't have an app for the thing that you do, or you don't exist inside of an app ecosystem, you probably don't exist.
Right.
The world is completely digital. So there are a lot of different kinds of tools that you use and that I use to do the work that we do. And today we're just going to riff. This literally, I have no idea what he's going to talk about. He has no idea. Well, you know one thing I'm going to talk about because I showed it.
But that's cool.
It's really cool.
Maybe we should leave with that one. That's a good one.
All right, I will. So about a year ago, a year and a half ago, I started using this app called Capo.
Okay.
And I mainly use it on the desktop. And what Capo does is it will ingest any song in almost any audio format. It can be a WAV, an MP3, AIF. It doesn't matter. You can throw any kind of audio at this program. I use the Mac version, but we found out today there's an iOS version of this.
Right, for your phone and the iPad.
So what this does is it actually analyzes the song, and it will give you the key that the song is in. It will tell you the tempo that the song is.
Nice.
It helps if it was done with a click track. It makes it a lot easier to be accurate. But it does some other really, really cool things. It will spit out an instant chord chart for that song.
That's amazing.
If you're a keyboard player, it'll spit it out as just the chords. If you're a guitar player, it'll actually have chord symbols and tablature built into it. And you can view this in whichever way you feel most comfortable with. But then there are some other amazing things that you can do with this app. You can drop markers. So as it lays the chords out, you can also drop markers for where the intro, the verse, the chorus, all those things are. So you're not just staring at a WAV file and you have no idea what's there. You actually get to the beginning of each section, and you can loop sections.
Oh, wow.
If there's a riff that you're trying to learn, you can just put that riff into the loop section and it'll play it over and over again. If you're trying to learn a groove, I've done this before with actually one of this guy's tunes, Christian Bush. There's a great tune where there's kind of a loopy sort of groove at the beginning that Travis McNabb did, and it's kind of a quirky groove.
Sure.
And I really wanted to learn it. I was like, that's so cool. And so I just kind of put it on loop, and I just play it over and over and over again along with him. It has a count-off feature. Because it can get the tempo, it'll back up and give you like a 4-count intro or an 8-count intro, whatever you want.
That's fantastic.
And so if you're learning songs and you want to play along to the song, you don't have to wait for just start and jump in.
Guess the beginning.
Yeah, it'll actually count off for you. And then if you go over to this little side pane, there are 3 tabs in this little side pane. One is called isolation.
Okay.
So when you open that pane, you can do a lot of different things. You can narrow the frequency range that you're trying to isolate. So let's say, for instance, you're a vocalist and you want to get rid of the vocals so that you can sing along. Almost make it like a karaoke style track. You can narrow in the frequency range to that frequency range that's specific to vocals, and you can subtract it to varying degrees, and you can control the width of it. So if the vocal is just in the middle, it'll pull that frequency range just out of the middle and leave the sides alone.
So if you want to rehearse just the vocals, wow, that's genius.
So that's the mute feature of the isolation. But if you want to solo something, let's say you're a bass player, not drummers, you can use this. I'll tell you in a second how I use it. But if you're a bass player, you just move that frequency range down to the bass. keep it in the middle, and then do solo. And it'll pull out some kick drum too, but it'll pull out the bass part. So that you can actually, especially if it's an intricate part.
Sure.
You can really begin to isolate parts. What I tend to do is I use the frequency range to get rid of some of the kick and snare stuff, a lot of the attack of those things, and some of the stuff that lives in the middle of the mix. Mm-hmm. And then I'll play around with the width of it and the panning of it a little bit so that I can try and get out some of the main groove elements. And I create for myself this play-along track.
That's pretty cool.
And so you're mainly hearing the outside left and right, so it feels like you're playing with the band. And if you kind of push or pull a little too much, you'll feel it.
Right.
Like you'll hear yourself rush or drag against the track.
Very cool.
So it's a great way to really teach yourself to lock in, especially with tunes that have really quirky grooves.
So this is a really nice multi-purpose tool.
Oh, you can use
for pretty much any instrument, really.
A ton of things.
Yeah.
I forgot how much I paid for it on the Mac because I bought it a year and a half ago, but we were just looking at $10.
Oh, for the phone app.
Yeah, for the phone app. I mean, that's cheap for all of the kinds of things that it does. You can also slow down or speed up the song. So if it's a real intricate tune and you don't have all the parts down, you can digitally slow it down and it'll hold the key, unlike tape, which
it's kind of like slowing down the old vinyl records.
It doesn't do that.
Right.
It just plays it slower. And the artifacting is not really
so without affecting pitch and all of that.
Yeah, and it doesn't get scratchy or choppy or any of that stuff within reason. I mean, you can't speed it. I mean, you can't speed it up.
Totally manipulate a track that you have no control over.
Right, yeah. You can't go from like 140 beats a minute to 20 beats a minute, without hearing some weirdness. But so you can slow it down, you can speed it up. If you're a vocalist or if you're wondering if maybe, especially for vocals, if you could sing it in a different key and it would be more comfortable, it'll actually pitch shift the whole thing up and down so that you could hear what would it sound like a half step down and would it be easier to sing, that kind of thing. So
I'm definitely going to check this one out because I was not familiar with this one.
Yeah, so Capo, it's made by Super Ultra Mega Groovy, I think is the name of the company.
It's a real best name
company.
ever.
Yeah, it's a hip company, man. And it's a hip product. It's something that I get a ton of value out of. I use it just about every single week as I'm learning tunes. If I've got to get chord charts, if I'm musical director on something, instead of me having to sit down at a piano,
write everything out,
and really twist my brain around stuff, especially complicated chords. I mean, it'll grab like a G major 7 and no problem. It'll grab a crazy extended chord sometimes. 98% of the time, it's right. So
that's impressive.
It'll even handle inversions of chords, which is kind of cool. So for somebody like me who's a drummer, it makes me look like a genius because if somebody has 12 tunes I need to make chord charts for, instead of it taking a year and a half to make charts, I can spit them out in an afternoon.
Nice.
And I can either pick up a guitar since it has the chord symbols. I can play the guitar and check the chords. Or I could sit down at the piano. I can kind of plunk out the chords and make sure they're right. And if for some reason they're not, it's close enough that you're in the ballpark. You just have to figure out what's not right. So it does 95% of the work for you in figuring that stuff out. Probably of all the apps we'll talk about, it's probably the most feature-rich and one that I get the most value for the money.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing, amazing app. Capo.
That's a great one.
So what about you? It's your turn. Bat one back.
Okay. One, because we are drummers and, 98% of the time we're required to be in charge of all the tempos and all the tunes. I really like a metronome app called Tempo.
I love it.
It's a great one.
Yep.
You can create set lists inside of the program. You can, do odd meters. You can do whatever you need, but it's just, I like it because it's very user friendly.
Yep.
The layout is very cool. You can even go into it and change the color schemes within the program, which is kind of cool depending on lighting in a room or what is visually appealing. You can have, I like that it has a video cue.
Yep.
You can see, the metronome blinking if you don't necessarily want it audible.
Yep.
But, so tempo is one. There you go.
My dogs like it too.
Your dogs.
They're like, tempo rocks! We love
It's probably your package at the front door.
Oh, shoot. That's DHL.
Brian's just gone. Okay, guys. Well, I'm here by myself because Brian just went to the front door. So anyway, so Tempo is a very cool app. And this is what it looks like on your iPad. But you can go in and control, tempo, your quarter note markings. You can do anytime signature. Very cool little application to use. And really for any musician, not just drummers, but it's very user-friendly. Which on the fly, too, is really easy because you can adjust tempos. Like if you push and pull. Brian must be very excited about this package because he just left the line.
I told you. Direct from China. These are prototypes.
Of the new pieces.
Prototypes.
Cool. So I showed up to your app there and
cool.
Gave just a little. That was hilarious. That just happened, folks.
Nowhere else in the world.
In that moment, it made me realize this is a lot more fun as a pairing to do than by yourself. That's a lonely island by yourself, man. Wow. I don't think I've ever seen anybody run to the front door so fast.
I'll be Costello to your Abbott all day long, man. I'm telling you, it's fine. I'm cool with it.
And I'm getting another phone call. I can't answer.
You're a popular dude. One of the things I really love about Tempo is the set list feature. So you can set up different types of clicks. If one has like a 12/8 bass to it with the triplets, if you want one that's just straight quarter notes, another one that's 8th notes or 16th notes, like every song can have its own specific click. And then you just put it together in a set list. Name it whatever the song is.
Right.
Put it right into a set list order. And this is even better. If you get on the gig and a singer decides, hey, we're going to skip that one. Right. Like, you just go to the next one. You just tap the list.
Right.
If someone decides 2 minutes before the set that they're going to change the whole list order, you don't have to do a lot of crazy stuff. Like in a Tom Rhythm watch, you're hosed.
Yeah, because it's whatever you set it up is, that's the way it is.
Yeah, I'm over there doing algebra going, all right, so 4 is 6, but 7 is 3.
Right.
And so
yeah, the click edit feature is nice.
I'm holding up progress over there trying to do arithmetic.
Or when a singer decides, let's take my song 10 clicks slower and totally change the vibe of the tune. Yeah.
So if you need to change the order, you just take your finger and you just drag these things around. You can do all kinds of editing of songs. When you really deep dive into some of the features, you can kind of move things around between set lists and do all kinds of other stuff. The visual indicator is great.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a band that's kind of pulling around and listening to the click, listening to it can be a distraction.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I just hit mute and I just kind of, I've got the light in my peripheral vision, so I have a roundabout indicator.
Gives you a nice little reference.
And then I can just use my ears to worry about the band. And as I'm really trying to seat the thing, I'm just kind of bouncing off the light a little bit. And if I get a little too far ahead or behind and I want to keep it there, it's cool. I've got that indicator. Or if I just decide to dump it all together, then
it's
not so
stop it.
Yeah, it's not so annoying that I can't let it run for a little bit before I just turn the thing off. So, and they just updated it. When I opened it up, I just got the update for this last night, and they've got a bunch of new features and stuff in here that I haven't even looked at. Automator features. I'm guessing that where you can automate tempos in a song. So if it starts at one tempo, it needs to ramp up or down for different things, you can. Maybe, the choruses are 2 clicks faster.
Pushed
than the
a little
verses.
bit.
Yeah. For that singer who doesn't totally know how to sing in time, you can actually accommodate them a little bit.
And then, if you have to scrap it, it's easy to stop.
It's got a nice big fat play stop button on it right there. So while we're talking about metronome apps, I'll throw another one out for you. This one's maybe a little hard to find. I've got you can see here, I've got, 10 different metronome apps that I kind of go between, and they all do interesting, different things. But one that I really like, that's probably the first one I ever bought, was called Dr.Bettote. It's supposed to be like French. Bettote.
That's how they get away from saying Dr. Beat, not saying Dr. Beat.
Yeah. So originally, that's why I started using this app, is because it was just like a Dr. Beat. It had a few more features in terms of the number of beats per measure that you could set and stuff like that. It's got a set list feature. It's not quite as fun and easy as tempo is.
Right.
But the one reason that I use this Dr.Bettote app, I'm just going to say it wrong the whole time.
Yeah, but I like that.
Is this swing tab feature. So if I go over to swing, let's say I'm in 16th notes, I can swing just the 16th note.
Okay.
Like if I'm trying to play like a looser kind of vibe or something that feels a little more like smooth jazz or hip-hoppy kind of thing. Or you can swing the 8th note independent of the 16th.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you really have a very specific feel that all the downbeats are pretty hard, but what happens in between is real loosey-goosey, you can really dial this thing in with those 8ths and 16ths to nail whatever the actual feel is. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll get something that's like that. So if you got this like James Gatson kind of groove, right? And it's 16th notes, but it's got this weird lope in between. You can literally sit there, you know, if you're as anal retentive as I am, you can sit there with these sliders and work E and
really figure it out
till it really gets in there. And
that's a nice feature. So it's not just necessarily a static click.
Right.
You can really make it more musical.
Yeah, very much so. I love it.
A little more fun to play along with.
For that. Yeah, and so it's got a rhythm coach in here so that you can do all kinds of different things. If you want to do some fluctuations in time up and down a little bit.
Okay.
If you want to do any kind of low to high training, let's say you're working on your rudiments and you want to work on, say, a paradiddle from 30 beats a minute to 230 beats a minute.
You can incrementally change it.
Yep.
Nice.
You can follow the tempo all the way up over the course of however long you want to do it. If you want to do it for 2 minutes, it'll go up and down in 2 minutes. If you want to do 10 minutes, you can go up and back down all the course of 10 minutes. And it figures out how to do it evenly. And you're just, you know, kind of playing chase with it a little bit. It's fun. It's a fun game to play with yourself with the rhythm coach.
Now, on the column on the left, are those built-in things, or do you import songs, or?
You can, it has a lot of different sounds in it.
Okay.
So you can set up different types of clicks. And so you can save all these different types of clicks, whether it's a feel or a particular batch of sounds that are in there, and you can save them as a preset kind of click. If you've got, like, some of these clicks are polymeter clicks, you can actually kind of save those as their own thing. Because it's got some drum sounds in it, you can actually do some drum loop program, very basic drum loop programming in there. So that if you don't have a drum machine or any kind of drum machine type app, then but we will talk about a few in just a little bit. Then you can actually do this in here, and again, you can put a playlist of those different clicks together, or you can do. It's got a set listing feature in this playlist option. It's just not as intuitive. The Frozen Ape one in tempo is just
the ability to move the 16ths and the 8ths separately. That is very cool. So whether you want it a swung or very straight or kind of that in between Motown thing. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, between that and the rhythm trainer, the coach, the tempo trainer, that's one that's super, super valuable for me. And again, the reason why I have 10 different metronomes on my iPad is they all do different things really, really well. And so with tempo, I use that on gigs. That's my gig metronome. With this other one we just talked about, I use that for my feel manipulation, and if I want to do the
more for your practicing and really working on something.
Definitely. And then this other one is called Time Guru. And what Time Guru is it's a gap click. I mean, it does a lot of other things,
right?
But it's a controllable gap click. So you use some of the features in the top to put together the kind of click that you want to hear, whether it's just a static quarter note or eighth note, 16th notes. You've got some different sounds that you can pick over here in this other list.
That's very cool.
Yep. And then you decide, after you get your tempo here on this slider, or you tap the tempo in, then you come up to this other slider that says random mute.
Wow.
Yep. Or you can have gradual, so that it gradually widens the timeout. But what I like to do a lot of times is I'll start like around 10%.
Okay.
So I'm playing with my click, and all of a sudden for a beat, maybe 2 beats, it'll just drop out. And as long as I'm right there with it when it comes back in, I'm good.
Okay.
And then
that's a nice, useful tool, though.
And as a real time check on how strong your internal clock is, I think gap clicks are an absolute necessity, because what happens with a lot of guys that practice with a metronome is they become metronome dependent. Mm-hmm. You ever been to one of those gigs where you're listening to the band, you're like, drummer's good, but you can tell the drummer's not controlling the time.
Yeah. And it also will dictate if the straighter the gig or the straighter the feel is, you can tell they're attached and they're only focused on that quarter note.
Right.
And they're having a hard time letting it breathe.
Well, there's some bands that I'll listen to and I'm like, well, the bass player's obviously holding this band together.
Right.
Like the drummer's just kind of floating on top of what the bass player's laying down. And especially for contemporary stuff and pop rock, R&B kind of stuff, you don't really want that. The drummer needs to be driving the bus, as I call it.
I agree.
But there's some bands I've seen and heard where it's pretty obvious that the drums and the bass are not the ones driving. The rhythm guitar player is so super solid that if you take him out of the equation, all you got is loopy, soupy, tempo, nothing.
That word you used earlier, organic.
It's all good when it's purposeful.
Right.
But when people just don't have really good, strong internal time, it's a mess. It really can ruin so much. And to the untrained ear, most people think that the average civilian can't tell good time from bad time. But because the past 20 years, so much music has been made with drum machines and click tracks and now computers that have grids.
Right.
The average civilian has a very finely tuned engine that really recognizes tempo. Doesn't know that.
Right.
But where it shows
because
up.
that's all you've heard for 20 years. You're programmed.
Yeah, you don't realize that. I heard, talking about Motown earlier, I heard a Motown song the other day on satellite radio. And then not too far after that, I heard a Rolling Stone song. And both of them did something really interesting. They sped up from the beginning of the song to the end. Mm-hmm. And I've done enough of my research and my practice and study on Motown to understand why they did that. They sped it up purposefully because it gave a 3-minute song more energy.
Sure.
It made you want to keep listening to
and
it.
Also some of that was everybody was in the room actually playing live in the moment.
Yeah.
So it could ebb and flow.
But if you listen to the way you do the things you do, and you sit down with your little tap tempo metronome, and when they started and you tap the tempo on it, you'll get one reading.
Right.
And then by the time you get to the last out chorus, it's a very subtle change, but it was a very purposeful change because the dynamic range of that song is so static. It starts at about the exact same dynamic range that it ends. They had to do something to keep it interesting and build energy. So they purposefully, from everything I've read and all the research I've done, they purposefully sped it up in the actual playing by the end so that it gave it more energy. It didn't feel like just a static continuum from beginning and end of the song. That would make for a boring song.
Sure.
The gap click is great for really helping you know how strong is your internal clock. You know, you'll get to where you're doing maybe a bar on and a bar off. Mm-hmm. And at first you'll feel like, am I going to hit the next downbeat?
You feel very isolated.
This is going to be weird. But at least you can do it in the sanctity of your own practice room. So if you blow it, you're the only one that knows.
But it's a great tool too, because you really get a really inner sense of where you are.
Yeah.
Because when that goes away, boy, you're like, I hope I'm close.
Yeah. Well, what happens eventually when you do this kind of work on your time is that you learn to treat the metronome as just a reference.
Right.
Instead of
another instrument, instead of being so reliant.
It's not the dictator of the time. You're still the dictator of time. The time is coming from internally. And all this is doing is it's giving you the feedback that says, yep, you're still there.
Yeah.
And you can widen this thing out. By the time you get to like 90%, 95%, you're going for a few bars at a time before you hear anything. And even then you don't hear a whole bar. You might hear 2 clicks.
Gotcha.
And because it always accents the first beat of every measure, you can see how many of these, you can change the meter here at the top.
Gotcha.
How many beats are in the measure.
Right.
It always gives a higher pitch to beat 1. So as you're cruising along and you've been doing this for 6.5 minutes, and all of a sudden your 1 lines up with that 1, you're like, I'm actually doing this.
Right.
This is cool. I'm really
success.
Yeah. And you're gonna be really surprised when you do that kind of deep surgical work on your time. It's not gonna make your playing stale.
Right.
It's gonna make it
just makes you more aware of what's going on.
You can be so uber confident. Like when you count off that 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever you're playing,
Right.
You're going to be super confident that by the end, you're just going to be it's going to be right where it needs to be. And everybody, if everybody's listening, is going to lock into that. They're going to feel comfortable. They're going to feel that cushion that you become. Like you become this cushion that everybody can just kind of sit on. It's comfy, man. It feels good. But it's not just this soupy, messy.
Right.
It's not like
the intent is there.
It's not like a foam mattress, in some cheap hotel. You just kind of like fall into it. All of a sudden you're like, oh, this kind of feels gross. It just kind of, no, it's the
you
right.
You may not get the call back you were looking for.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's the right amount of we'll call it firm confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Like when your time is that strong. And you hear that maybe a vocalist wants to. I had this happen to me a couple of weeks ago on a gig. I could hear the tempo that we had decided on was not really the tempo the vocalist needed to sing it at. They needed to sing it a couple of clicks faster. Now, we weren't running a click or anything.
Sure.
My time is strong enough that I can listen. I'm holding it down. I'm locking it down. Everybody's cool, but I'm listening. I'm going, that vocalist would be a lot more comfortable if we just, over the course of, say, a whole verse, like 8 bars, just wrench it up, just 2 BPM.
Right.
Just a little bit. And all of a sudden you feel like the band it's not anything you hear.
Sure.
But the band can immediately feel, okay, I'm listening. I can hear him. I can hear. All of a sudden, we lock into the vocalist, and now we're cruising like. I mean, it's like an army of people all lockstep instead of us kind of like a boxing match,
tug of war.
We're kind of combating the vocalist. How about we accommodate them a little bit? We listen and we go, yeah, actually, you know what? If we're just a shade faster.
Have to be subtle with that though, because that can be a train wreck in the opposite direction real quick.
To do it. You don't just do a fill and you're a new tempo.
Right.
And that's why things like the gap click, that gradual tempo ramp thing that's in the other app where you learn to sort of gradually move up and down, you can kind of control. Now all of a sudden, man, it's like you got both hands on the steering wheel and you're steering this big bus around that's the band. And now you really feel like, wow, I actually have some ability to make this awesome.
Right.
Like, it's not just us hacking at some songs that we played a whole lot. Like, this is a living, breathing thing. And if I just do this little thing here that just kind of pushes it this way or that way, or maybe the guitar player, like, his rhythm part is super incredible, important with like a Motown thing or some kind of R&B thing, like a Memphis-y thing.
Any funk tunes.
Yeah. If you're you're kind of used to playing it in one place, and then you get because so many of the bands I play with, I don't play with a static group of folks.
Right.
We may be playing from a pretty standard song list, especially on cover gigs, but it's not like I play with the same guys every single week. So I really have to listen a lot. And so when we're playing, I count a tune off and we start playing, and I notice, the rhythm guitar is very important in this song, and he's feeling it a little bit differently. I can slowly change what I do over the course of a section of a tune. Sometimes even from the downbeat through that 8-bar intro to the verse, if you're really listening, you can morph over 8 bars, and by the verse, what was a pretty good start becomes a band that sounds like they've been playing together for 25 years. Part 1 is you got to use your ears.
Got to listen.
But then part 2 is you've got to have this skill set that you can manipulate what you do. You have these skill sets that no matter what style of music you're playing, no matter what volume, no matter what tempo, no matter what subdivision, like you have these rooted skill sets that allow you to change what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Instead of learning something one way, like learning the groove to Love and Happiness or something, or learning like Steve Jordan. Everybody's kind of hip on learning Steve Jordan grooves now. Like you learn Waiting on the World to Change. Imagine taking that groove and then being able to not just play it the way that it is on the record at that tempo with that kind of swagger, but having 20 other ways you can play it.
Right.
At varying tempos, varying feels. You can widen out the swing. You can tighten up the swing. Like you can do all kinds of things inside. Well, these kind of apps that we're talking about are the sort of thing that I use to help me with that. I can program in what that feel might be like if it's 1 or 2 clicks faster, or if we compress the swing a little bit, or if we widen it out a little bit. And all of a sudden, with the gap click, I can double check. Am I really holding this down the way I think I'm holding it down?
Right.
Or am I fooling myself?
It's a really great reference.
Yeah. So those are just a few of the metronome apps. I mean, I can
another one I'll mention that I noticed you have too. This is a great one for getting tempos. If you're having to learn a tune really quickly and you don't have, the reference, LiveBPM.
Yes.
Is a good one because you can be charting out your tune, have your phone playing a song on your iPad or whatever.
Yep.
Hit that LiveBPM. It'll give you the tempo marking real quick.
Yeah.
It's kind of a handy tool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's not so much a drum machine app as it is just a tempo marking.
Right. Exactly. So what about, do you use any kind of beatboxes or drum machines or things like that?
I don't app-wise.
Okay.
I've still got a couple of old school drum machines at the house that if I need some,
What do you
I got an SR16.
Oh, yeah.
And I've actually I still have an old Yamaha RX5.
Oh, my gosh.
With the little sound cards.
Yep.
I still love the way that thing sounds.
The cowbell on that is iconic.
It's the best sounding cowbell ever. So for that and rehearsing at home or whatever, and even some, say click markings, I might use those still.
Yep.
So I haven't delved into the drum machine. How about yourself on the app-wise?
So I'm like you. I've got one of the newer, whatever the new version of the SR16 is. I have one down in my studio.
I still have a D4 somewhere.
I sold mine on eBay like 2 years ago.
Got 20 cents.
Somebody in Venezuela bought it for like $150. It was cool.
Oh, hello. You need another one?
I've got some things like I've got a lot of different things like across the room. And there's a DTX Extreme brain on a kit and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got the Roland TD. What's up? TD20.
Yeah. But as far as app wise, I kind of live in two different worlds. When I'm on the computer and I'm working in the studio, I've got a few different tools. Reason is a big one that I use for a lot of my drum sequencing.
Sure.
If I'm doing drum sequencing that's more traditional kind of drum machine programming, like I call it 808 style programming, where you've got that interface where you punch a few buttons
and you've got
turn
a
few
quick
knobs,
beat, right?
Got a few things happening, and especially if I need to marry a drum machine with, say, some loop material, because Reason has got it's got the drum machine-y type stuff in there. It's got an MPC style drum sequencing thing called Kong. It looks like an MPC. You can pull in your own samples. You can do all kinds of stuff, and it works like an MPC. You can route it to a pad controller like I've got over there. And then there's also a sampler module where you can either chop up a bigger song, like pull a loop out of a song.
I got you.
Or what I do a lot of times is if I like the kick and snare of a particular tune, I can chop it up in the sampler and just trigger those. And since they're all MIDI, all the slices are MIDI mapped, then if I need it to be a little faster or slower, we can very easily do that. Instead of having to do a lot of surgical stuff, the sampler module in Reason is pretty cool for doing that. So, and I can do all of that in one interface. So I can do some drum machine stuff that's more like old school 808 style type programming. Then I can drop into Kong and I can add some stuff to it that's more like MPC stuff, especially if I want to put some percussion on it or something, like some shakery kind of things that are sequenced. And then I can drop down into the sampler and I can pull in pieces
whatever sounds you want
to go on top of that even. So for that, I love that kind of program. Inside my DAW, I've got 2 or 3 other things, but app-wise, if I'm talking about iPad, so I was a real big fan of the hardware unit, the iElectribe that Korg made.
Yeah, those are nice little machines.
And there's all kinds of weird, quirky, cool electro kind of groove sounds in there. So I've got the iOS version of that app.
Cool.
And it's pretty much the exact same thing as the hardware.
The little box.
Yeah, but it's actually in an app interface.
Oh, nice.
So you've got, it's like looking at the face of the machine. It even has, they built this valve tube circuit into the thing, so you kind of heat it up a little bit and give it a little distortion. It's even got that built into it. But if you've ever used an iElectribe, it's the exact same kind of interface where all the notes are lined up at the bottom. It's got not only drum sounds, but there's some bass and other analog synth sounds in there. So you could actually program more than just drums. A lot of times when I'm practicing, especially if I'm practicing an idea, let's say I'm doing 5-note groupings or something. It's one thing to practice it against a metronome. And, that helps you with the time and helps to keep you from rushing or dragging. But to make musical sense of those ideas, you need
or
context.
you have a little bass line or something to play over it.
Yeah, you can program in a bar, 2 bars, or 4 bars of some kind of little bass line and maybe even a short chord sequence, like 3 chords over 4 bars. And now all of a sudden you got a musical context. So if you're playing these across the bar line kind of things, you've got just long enough of a sequence so that you can stretch out the idea and hear what it sounds like, or what it would sound like if you used it in a bigger piece of music. So if I'm doing the 5/4, or not 5/4, but it's groupings of 5 and 16th notes.
Right.
So I'm going to beat on the table. We haven't done this in the show yet. So if you're doing 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, so do me a favor on the table there. Now, make sure that beat stays strong, okay? So if I'm doing like 5, I'm doing bat 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 bat. So if you're just with a straight metronome, you can very easily lose where you are in like a 4-bar phrase.
Sure.
But let's say I program in a bass line, either that plays against that, or a lot of times what I'll do is I'll program in a musical.
More hear the phrase.
I'll actually program in a musical phrase that goes with that idea.
Nice.
And helps me to know how to get across a bigger amount of time. So
because if you just try to cram the 5 over the 4, or the 5 over the 8, and you don't know where the 1 is, you're like what did I just do?
Yeah. So, for instance, we'll do the same thing. So we'll kind of on the table here. So it's something like an iLectribe or something like that. I might program something to play along with me to let me know. Let's say I'm going to do a 4-bar phrase of this. So I'll end up going boom, 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 doom, 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 rock-a-dock-a-one. And all of a sudden, I've got my whole phrase. And I just know there's 3 repetitions of that melody, and then we've got 1 bar of a fill that I can use to get myself back to the top of the phrase.
And that's really the key with all of these is creating a musical atmosphere so you're not just doing stagnant exercises.
Yeah.
Make it musical, make it fun, and then your growth will be exponential because you'll spend more time doing it.
Right. Well, and that's one of the frustrating things that I get from people that come to take lessons with me. They're like, I practice 2 hours a day and I don't hear a difference.
Right.
Well, either you're practicing the wrong stuff the wrong way, or you're not practicing in a way that's going to make you be able to take these tools. You're just throwing tools in a box.
Right.
But you never take the time to figure out what that tool that you're working on, what that hammer does. What kind of nails does that hammer drive? Or, what kind of screws do you use with that particular screwdriver? And so invariably what happens is guys will try and shoehorn these new ideas in on the gig, and then they go, well, that sounds like crap. Why did I spend all this time practicing this?
Right. Just practicing a phrase or just practicing an idea without anything musical to bounce it off of.
Right.
It's still just an exercise.
Well, it's like learning a language, but never ever learning to have a conversation.
Right. Never putting it together in a sentence.
Yeah. It's like you buy a dictionary for Spanish and you just start learning a whole bunch of random Spanish words.
Right. Doesn't mean you can speak the language. That's
right. Yeah. You could know how to spell it. You can know how to pronounce it. You could know what the meaning of it is. But until you know how to line those things up into a cohesive sentence, and then you can string enough sentences together for a complete thought, and then you can listen to someone else's thought that isn't pre-planned and know what they're saying and know how to respond. Like, you don't know the language. You just don't. You know a lot of pieces and fragments and things that could make up the language, but you don't really have a grasp of the language. You start to use tools like this, like iLectribe, or the one that's super cool. If I'm getting really geeky, there's a special edition of this that's the Gorillaz Edition.
Nice.
So they used iLectribe to on one of their albums, and so they loaded all of the pieces of that album into their own version of the iLectribe.
That's cool.
So you've got the verses and the choruses of all these different songs and all the pieces and the samples, and that's the fun one to play along with.
I bet.
I don't really do a lot of changing of the patterns.
Sure, because they're already cool.
They're cooler than anything I could ever come up with. And so the Gorillaz edition of that same Korg iElectribe is super, super awesome. So those are 2 beat boxes that have a little bit more melodic content to them that I like. While I'm just kind of riffing on some of these things, there's a few other more MPC style apps that I'll use. There's an actual iMPC. It's a virtual version of an Akai MPC. So if you're familiar with those at all, hip hop guys know exactly what
that would have cost you $3,000 to have that today.
I know it. Not no more.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, all that stuff is actually in here. And when you flip through some of the different windows and stuff that are in here, the sampler window, you can actually sample sounds into this thing, and you can chop them up just like you used to could do on an actual MPC and things like that. You can actually pull in tunes. It has a virtual turntable.
You can DJ that sucker.
You can. A lot of it is pitch shifting and stuff like that. But so you've got different effects. You got all kinds of. There's a mixer in here. So iMPC I use for a lot of that kind of programming stuff, and then I'm a big user of Native Instruments products. Maschine is their drum sequencer that I use a lot in the studio. They have iMaschine, which is kind of a stripped down version of the Maschine Studio that I have here downstairs. In fact, a lot of the packs that come with iMaschine are smaller versions of the big Maschine packs. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll start on iMaschine with an idea, and I'll start putting it together in here. And it's very MPC style with the pads and samples and that sort of thing. It does a few things differently. But I'll start here, and then I'll throw it into Maschine on my computer where I can really blow the thing out. I really can do a whole lot of stuff with it at that point. So that's more of the MPC style kind of thing. And I'll just show one other cool thing. I used to collect vintage drum machines. That was when you could go to a garage sale
and find them cheap.
You could get an old Wurlitzer or an old Baldwin little drum machine-y kind of thing for $10.
Right.
Yeah. Now everybody, because Coldplay uses it and Radiohead uses that kind of stuff. Now those things are $1,000 on eBay, right? So I have now replaced it with a cool app called Funkbox.
Nice.
All this is a bunch of vintage drum machines.
Nice.
Play a few of them there. It's got an 808 in it. It's got a TR 606. My favorite is the CR78. I used to have one of these. The CompuRhythm CR78.
We just need to let that be our background music.
I think that's our new theme song. Since I hadn't had time to finish writing a new theme song for us. I can hear Barry White already.
I know, right?
Baby.
Show you right.
Or disco. Let's go to disco. That's not a disco rhythm. It's a hip hop rhythm. There we go.
Sounds just like the old boxes too. That's hilarious.
Man. I love this thing, the Funkbox. So the thing that's cool about the Funkbox, it's got your pads. So you can actually
make a little program where it's got patterns.
Yeah. It actually has a sequencer built into it. So you can go into the pattern edit here, and it's just got a little
the grid.
Yeah,
cool.
It's just a little grid based, and you just kind of pop your finger down, kind of like Fruity Loops. You just pop your finger down on different things.
Create beats you didn't know you could play.
Yeah, you can do step based sequencing in this thing. You can manipulate the tempo. Go back to the main panel there. Oh, hit the button, not the name. You can store patterns. It's got a little mixer in there. The whole interface is very intuitive, and it feels like an old rhythm box. And they've just got all kinds of cool stuff that comes with it. So the Funkbox. If you're looking for a whole lot of different drum sounds in one place, especially those cool old school kind of sounds, it's definitely the place to go. So, what else? What's an app you like?
I'm on sensory overload at the moment.
It's all right.
Well, I will backtrack because these aren't necessarily drum specific, but because we touched on the subject of digital mixers, I highly recommend everybody go put the digital mixer apps on your iPad, because most of the venues you play now, there's a few choices. Yeah. But if you have the app, 9 times out of 10, the sound guy is going to be very cool and allow you access so you can control your own mix. Yep. I just find that very useful. Oh yeah. So you can control your own mix. That's such a nice thing nowadays. Yeah. Yeah. You actually make their job a little bit easier, and it makes your job easier because you can hear exactly what you want when you want. Exactly. And organically, dynamically on the gig, if something is throwing you off, if a vocalist all of a sudden doesn't know a song because they've never heard this Phil Collins song that you're doing and they don't really know the lyrics. Right. They're just kind of meandering through it like bad karaoke. Then all of a sudden you can just kind of grab the little fader and you just pull them down. Yeah. Just enough so that you can hang on to them, but you can get them out and avoid the annoyance. Focus on the tune. Yeah. Gotcha. So, yeah. Or my favorite is when you have a singer and you count the tune off and for some reason they start singing behind the beat. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, you got to go down. I'll meet you at the end.
Yeah.
Because I'm not moving. Because if I move, it'll just keep slowing down.
I'll see you on the other side, man. Shoot. Yeah. So at this point, especially if you have any inclination to learn about recording, one of the great things about all these different mixer apps is most of their interfaces build in the majority of the features of whatever that digital mixer is. So if you go into the demo mode on them, you can learn to use like a Behringer X32.
Right.
You can learn to use it and not have to buy one.
Right.
Because all of it's sitting right there.
It's all right there.
This week, I had to learn how to use a Roland M5000. So, I got the manual. I watched a few video tutorials. But one of the things that was...
Sure, the manual is like this. Roland has a tendency.
Now the manual is this because it's all PDF. Right. But yeah, it's like it's an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
It would be the New York telephone book if you actually had to print that thing out,
Right.
And so, but now you can get a PDF, but it's still a lot to read. Yeah. But the great thing about it is I could get my PDF and I could put it in my computer over here. And I could have the app open. And since the app acts like the touch screen on that thing.
Oh, cool.
And you can sort of access things very similarly to how you do on the touch screen on that mixer. Then I could work with that mixer offline.
So it's like a real-time tutorial.
Yeah, and so when I showed up and I get behind that thing and the other guys are going, yeah, I did the class on this like 6 months ago. I'm like, step out of the way, hang on a second. And I'm just going.
Right.
Like I've been on it forever. And they have no idea. 2 days ago, I had no clue.
Right.
I wouldn't know where the power button was.
I'm going to Google this, see what happens.
But that's the great thing about these apps. You can really, in some cases, you can be of added value when you get to the gig because, I've had gigs where, whoever's operating the mixer kind of knows how to do stuff, but not really. Where I've been able to kind of jump in and go, hey, I think I know how to do that for you. Let me try something.
Sure.
And, just without bullying them out of the way, you're just trying.
Just trying to help.
I'm just going to help. Hey, let me see. I think I've used this before. Let's see if I can do what it is.
Let me show you how to turn your aux sends on. It'll help everybody. Just trust me.
Where's the button for the pre and the post fade? Yeah.
Don't get me started.
So you can learn with all those different mixer apps, and pretty much everybody now at this point that makes a digital mixer has an app for their mixer. Some of them have a couple of different versions of their apps. You can get on there. You can learn how to use those things.
What's really cool about all this, not to change your thought is that with all these apps that are available, you no longer have to go out and buy all these machines and spend thousands of dollars for, $10, $5, whatever the app may cost. Man, the learning tools that you have at your disposal on technology today is amazing.
Do you know that Yamaha drum machine that you have? Do you know how much that thing was brand new?
Oh, it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous because I have that and I have the RX-21, which was the percussion version.
Yep.
I'm not getting rid of them just because they're cool.
Yeah. Well,
but they were so expensive.
Well, when I was in college, the only reason I got to play with any drum machines at all was because I taught in a music store.
Right.
Otherwise, I never would have been able to buy those things.
Right.
I couldn't afford $800, $1,000. Some of these things were like, especially if you get up into like the land of the really expensive tools. You pay $2,000 for some of these things. Kind of like the Linn drums of the world and stuff. Those things they weren't just cost prohibitive. They were utterly impossible to buy.
Yeah.
For a college student.
Because Prince had the first three.
Yeah. But because I worked in a music store and they had a stock of all those things and I taught right upstairs, I could just, hey, let me learn how to use that so I can show you or so I can show your customers.
Right.
That's what it's funny because
great sales tool.
One of the things when I was teaching a music store when I was in college, I made myself, I really did two things at once. I got access to all these amazing tools and I could use them for my own stuff. But also I could give value to these sales guys that most of them weren't drummers, and they certainly didn't know how to operate these things. And I could sit for hours on end. And a lot of times they'd even let me take the floor model home for a couple of days.
Right on.
Because I could come back and we could sit for an hour and I could show them just enough stuff that they could actually sell when I wasn't around, you know. But if I was upstairs teaching and I had a half hour off, they'd be like, Brian, come down and show this guy. And then you just, you know, run it through all its paces.
Right.
Sold.
Right.
Done. Somebody that actually has a real job and real money would buy one.
Right. A little more than pattern 1, pattern 2.
Yeah, exactly. Watch, I can erase the hi-hat. So, but yeah, those things were incredibly cost prohibitive back in the day.
Yeah.
And now for $10, $20, at most sometimes $50, you can get a drum machine app or a drum loop app or something to do this creation of a rhythm that only helps you get better at what you do and make you more valuable to the people that you work with.
Agreed.
I mean, I've swapped all kinds of stuff with singer-songwriters for demos. You know, they don't really have the budget yet to come into the studio, and they're just going to use their 2-channel interface to write some of their demos on an acoustic guitar, and they just want some quick little drum loopy things.
Sure.
I can just bounce all kinds of stuff while I'm just hanging out.
Another great one that just hit me is if you're on Mac or Apple products, GarageBand.
Oh, yeah.
It's free. A great one. It's free, and there are so many loops available, not just drum loops and percussion loops, but bass lines, keyboard parts, guitar parts, acoustic. I mean, you can have a room full of musicians at a button's touch and really work on playing with people even when you can't play with people.
And what a lot of guys don't know, on the Mac platform, used to with GarageBand, they had all these add-on packs that you could get. They had, the world
jam packs.
Yeah, the jam packs. They had the world groove stuff. They had the RB stuff. They had the jazz stuff. Now, if you upgrade into Logic for $200, which anybody that's getting into recording that wants to buy some kind of DAW platform, Logic's usually the one I steer them towards. Because for $200 you get, it's insane.
You cannot beat it for what you get and what you can do with it.
All of those jam packs that originally came with GarageBand that you had to pay more than $200 for. I think they were like $50 a piece or something.
I think they were $99 a piece.
Oh, were they?
I think so.
Oh, man. I must have got them on a sale.
I could be wrong. That might have been $50.
But I mean,
it was still something additional.
For less than the cost of all the jam packs, you get Logic, you get all this expanded library stuff, and you get all of those original jam packs. You could go for years through those jam packs and not exhaust all the possibilities.
That's true. You could just go through one jam pack and never exhaust them.
Yeah, and
there's a lot of content.
While we're talking about computer-based apps, even if you use a Pro Tools or a Studio One or any other kind of DAW, if you're on the Mac platform, I think it's worth it to spend the $200 on Logic. One, because you're going to run across, especially keyboard player producers that work in Logic. There's such a rich, robust library of virtual synths and sequencing stuff in Logic that most every keyboard player I know uses Logic, especially producers that play keys.
Right.
But for that $200, you get all kinds of guitar grooves and bass grooves and keyboard things and things that you can pull into a sequence and practice along to. Again, when we were talking about practicing a few weeks ago, if you're practicing stuff just for the athleticism of practicing, it's sort of it's a fool's errand,
right,
really,
sure.
Unless you just enjoy practicing really hard crap that you'll never get to use. But if you have a tool like Logic that has all these musical colors, and you can pull from that palette and create these little mini songs, they don't even have to be entire compositions. It can just be little 16-bar mini songs.
Sure.
Now you've got a cool guitar line and a cool bass line, a little bit of a pad synth thing happening. So you've got something to support you musically, and you've got a better idea of what those ideas are going to sound like in context. So when you're on the gig, you'll know when to pull out that piece of vocabulary. It's all about the conversation, man.
Absolutely.
All about the conversation.
We may have to do a part 2, man.
I think we're going to have to. Let's hit one other, and it's really not just one app. it's a whole set of apps that I think we have to talk about.
I agree.
There's one drummer in particular that has led the charge into the technological world. And hint, he ain't 22 years old. He's one of our elder statesmen in the drum community. And Peter Erskine has probably done more for drummers and technology than almost any drummer in the last 30 or 40 years.
Agreed.
And especially when it comes to what he's done in the iOS platform. Peter has a whole suite of different products that fall under the Jazz Essentials Play Along moniker. There's 3 of them in particular. There's 2 different jazz modules. There's also an Afro-Cuban module. But
it's really good.
He also takes that same kind of paradigm, and I think he started off with Joy Luck.
Yes.
But there's a Joy Luck app where they actually took the songs from this album and did something very similar to what's in the Jazz Essentials catalog. But he's also the guy behind the Code of Funk app with David Garibaldi. And so this whole interface in the Garibaldi app looks exactly like all of those Erskine apps because it's the same technology. Comes from the same folks. So with the Jazz Essentials Play Along, you end up with, like with number 1, you get 10 different songs. Now, because of copyright, they can't put the name of the song. Mm-hmm. But they can change the name a little. So if you need to learn to play along to Autumn Leaves, they have Autumnal Foliage. And not only do they have autumnal foliage, they actually have it in 2 different keys and 2 very different tempo stylings of it. So you get a different flavor with each one. And so you can put on that song, and not only is there a play along that contains a mixer that has a separate fader for drums, bass, piano, and the click, but you also have charts, and they have charts in the different key centers, whether you're playing trumpet, saxophone, whatever. You know, there's for B-flat instruments, for C instruments, and for E-flat instruments. So you basically have a real book built into the app.
And a really good real book at that.
Yeah.
These are legit charts.
Yeah, they can't publish the melodies of these songs because of copyright, but you're getting the same chord progression, the same harmonic structure. And if you know the melody for Autumn Leaves, you can sing it right along with this track. If anything, you're actually doing yourself a favor because you're learning the melody of the song while you're learning to play the style, which is incredibly important with jazz music. If you don't know the melody of a jazz standard, you really don't know the jazz standard that you're trying to play. You're just playing at the jazz. The jazz.
Playing through it.
So this is great because what it'll allow you to do is it'll cause you to learn the melody of the song. And then you can actually kind of follow a real book style chart through with all the chart direction repeats and first and second endings and DCs and DSs and things like that. And the thing that I really love about it, especially if you need training wheels, if you're a rock drummer like I was at once and still feel like I am, and you need training wheels, then what you can do is you can get Peter in your mix, and then you can gradually start pulling him down. And you can keep the click there.
Nice.
Just to help you keep the time.
You can start out relying on them, and then as you learn it, pull them out.
And when you get your big boy pants on, you can, when you finally get to that level, you can have the count off, which is a nice swingy count off.
Right.
And then there's no click, no drums, just the piano and the bass.
Playing with the band.
And that's where you really find out how good your time and your feel are. Because if you're pulling or if you're dragging, if you're all over the joint, those guys are right in time with what was there before. Mm-hmm. And you can record yourself with these apps. And so if you find that all of a sudden it sounds great and you're swinging along with everybody there, then maybe you're ready to go play a jazz gig. if you know enough songs.
Right.
But feel wise, it's a great barometer, because what I'll do is I'll take that bass and piano track and I'll run it into my recorder, and then I'll have some mics on my drums and I'll play along to it. And then I'll just listen back to the recording, and I can instantly tell whether or not I'm swinging with those guys, because they're swinging without me.
Right.
If it sounds like,
because you're jumping into big shoes right there trying to play with Peter's folks.
Yeah, and if all of a sudden it swings like an anvil, the problem is probably
I'm still
you.
a rock guy.
Yeah, goom, 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 just heel up all over the bass drum, just going.
The double pedal on the jazz gig.
But you got some swing stuff in there, more traditional kind of swing stuff. You got some bluesy stuff. You got some more up-tempo bop stuff, some Latin-y things, modal tunes, kind of like you'd hear like in a Miles Davis thing. All that sort of stuff. That whole family of apps, it's just worth it to buy all of them. And they're what, $10 or something. It's not like they're super expensive. And you can actually learn some tunes and get some things done.
Nice. Good choices.
You think we've overloaded everybody in the app world?
I'm going to say yes. I'm overloaded. I'm sitting right next to you.
There's a ton more that we could talk about. I tell you what would be really cool is if you would jump on dialdrummer.net, and in the comment section right underneath the posting for this episode, if you would post some of your favorite apps and links to them, I'd like to know what they are.
Yeah, let us know what you're using. If you've got something we haven't touched on, we'd love to know about, because we love to learn and find out new things.
Yeah, and that's perfectly what that comment section is perfectly designed for. Is you can throw in your comments about the show, but you can also put links and things into the things that go along with our show topics, like these apps. So make sure you visit dialdrummer.net to make that happen. And gosh, what else? You can email us with questions and comments, dialadrummer@gmail.com. Please make sure that you're following us on social. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and most importantly, YouTube. Because we're really still trying to get to that magic number of 100 so that we can secure the Dial a Drummer moniker for our channel.
For our own channel.
Even if you don't use YouTube a lot, as long as you're on there some and you have an account, just subscribe to us. Hit the little subscribe button. You can search. We're easy to find on YouTube. Just hit subscribe. You help that number go up, and hopefully in another month we'll have 100 people subscribing to us. And hint, if you're listening on audio, man, the audio downloads have been nuts.
Nice.
Since we put that together.
That's nice to hear.
I love every week seeing more and more people that are using the subscribe button on their podcast app to get to hear us every week. But I'll just tell you, there's a few things about this podcast you only get from watching the video.
That's true.
There's a few little Easter eggs that
little special nuggets,
things that you have to sort of be there in the room for.
Right.
And we make sure that they're on the video version of this. So anyway, so that's how you get a hold of us. We really appreciate you guys watching and listening and sending comments and questions. And it's to the point now where I can't go anywhere without seeing someone that I know that goes, man, I listened to the podcast the other day.
I know, right? It's been nice to get some feedback, and appreciate everybody tuning in and giving us a nice response.
Yeah. That's it for this week, guys.
That's it.
We really appreciate you, and make sure you tell all your friends. Share some links, jump in the conversation, and happy apping, guys.
See you later.
that wasn't on the internet. I don't think there's anything of me cursing really bad on the internet. I'd like to keep it that way. Because one day
when the kid kept messing with
one day I'm going to be in court. And I'm going to go, I don't even curse in public. And people are going to go, but we got this one video.
We have you on audio, sir.
You dropped like a dozen F-bombs in 4.5 seconds. It was a new world record. Jeez. Oh, man. You know what? I'm sweating, and I want a vacation. And I'm going to a movie tonight. That's what I'm going to do.
Nice.
I'm just going to... Rose isn't going with me. I'm just going by myself. You think I want to be around people right now? Gee whiz, man. I'm so sick of people.
Well, I feel honored to share this booth with you for the next hour.
For the next 5.5 minutes until you go, I'm out! I'm done!
I'm going to get a steak.
You're an ass! You're an ass! I don't like you! You're not nice.
We're off to a resounding start.
I'm excited about this. Can you tell?
It's been a while, buddy. Oh, man.
This is about to be the longest hour of your life. Just get ready for it.
Can I leave now? I got things to do.
I'm too cheap to pay a therapist. I'm not too cheap to get my shirts dry cleaned, though.
Priorities.
Yeah, man. My brain can be
it's not
all
about how
wrinkled.
you feel,
My
it's
shirts
about how you
can't
look.
My brain can be all wrinkled, but not my shirts, baby.
Oh, that's funny.